So we're going to continue looking at Ezekiel, and my plan was to finish that today, but that ain't going to happen. You cannot. Okay, Lonnie, you sit up here from now on. I have to be able to go like that every once in a while. Keep him in line, these retired teachers. Um, yeah, you just cannot believe how much information is in the Bible if we just take the time to read it. And sorry, but nobody in this room, but plenty of Christians I know the New Testament inside out. They couldn't tell you Isaiah from Jeremiah on the Old Testament side. There is so much over there. Oh, all this prophecy that's yet to be fulfilled. And you're going to get an eyeful today again. And again, I'm sorry. I should make copies for everybody, but it's just too much. So if you're trying to keep up, we're at Ezekiel 15:23 today. Now, summary of all of last week. God is going to restore the Jewish nation and the Jewish people to their rightly place as his chosen people. That's sort of what we looked at last week. Sorry, somebody's pointing over here.
You said Ezekiel
37:15-23. Yeah, sorry. But last week we saw where God has promised the Jews, he's bringing them all back to Israel. And if we get a chance today, if not next week, somewhere in here, we're going to look at what that'll look like. But he's bringing all the Jews back to Israel. He's going to restore them in their place in society, if you will, and set up his kingdom, and they will be his chosen people. Did we do Egypt last week? I can't remember now. No. Okay. We're going to look at Egypt today. Oh, because he's got something to say about Israel, and he's got something to say about Egypt. So, 37:15-23. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, take a stick of wood and write on it, belonging to Judah and the Israelites associated with him. Then take another stick of wood and write on it, belonging to Joseph, that is to Ephraim, and all the Israelites associated with him. Join them together into one stick, so that they will become one in your hand. When your people ask you, won't you tell us what you mean by this? Say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am going to take the stick of Joseph, which is in Ephraim's hand, and the stick of the Israelite tribes associated with him, and join it to Judah's stick. I will make them into a single stick of wood, and they will become one in my hand. Hold before their eyes the sticks you have written on, and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will take the Israelites out of the nations where they have gone. I will gather them from all around and bring them back into their own land. I will make them one nation in the land on the mountain of Israel. There will be one king over all of them, and they will never again be two nations or be divided into two kingdoms. They will no longer defile themselves with their idols and vile images or with any of their offenses, for I will save them from all their sinful backsliding, and I will cleanse them. They will be my people, and I will be their God. So we see a picture here of the two nations coming together. The northern 10 tribes, Israel, the two southern tribes, Judah. One nation being called back into the land. Did that happen in 1947?
They're still talking about the lost tribes of Israel, so you would think no.
Well, that's true. They're still talking about, where, but what's the clue? The key thing here that says 1947 wasn't it. What will be different when this is fulfilled versus the nation of Israel today? They will have a king, and they don't have one today. There'll be a lot different. But it talks about God being their king. in verse 22, there will be one king over all of them, and they will never again be two nations or be divided into two kingdoms. So we haven't seen that yet. This is a to be fulfilled, one king. Then we're going to go move along a little. I really want to get to some other things here. Israel 37, 24 to 28. Oh, okay. So when will this happen? Here we go. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. Oh, this has not happened yet, unless I missed it, right? All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. Have we heard this before? Separating the sheep from the goats? It's in the New Testament. He will put the sheep on his right hand and the goats on his left. My servant David will be king over them. There's a big thing to asterisk in your Bible right there. Who's going to be king of Israel? Which raises another question. Wait a minute. I thought Jesus was king. So what's this telling us?
Well, Jesus is from the house of David.
Maybe. What's Jesus in this? It says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit in his glorious throne. And what's Jesus coming as this time? We mentioned this before. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, King of the whole earth, King of the world. David will be King of Israel. We're starting to get a little insight. Remember, we talked about he comes, he sets up his millennial kingdom, 1,000 years, we're done. No, wait a minute. What's his kingdom look like when he sets it up? He's going to have David king over Israel. He's going to appoint rulers over these different nations, countries, whatever the geography looks like at the time. David will be restored to the throne as the king of Israel. It says so right here. My servant David will be king over them. And this is Christ talking, so he can't be talking about himself. My servant David will be king over them, and they will all have one shepherd. They will follow my laws and be careful to keep my decrees. They will live in the land I gave to my servant Jacob, the land where your ancestors lived. They and their children's children will live there forever. And David, my servant, will be their prince forever. I will make a covenant of peace with them. It will be an everlasting covenant. I will establish them and increase their numbers, and I will... Oh, that's another thing. What's happening during the millennial reign? What did he just say right there?
Babies.
Yeah, we're increasing. Yeah. And when we get in, again, you're going to more and more as we get deeper into this. During the millennial reign, lifespans get extended dramatically, and but we do have people dying. You're going to have births, deaths, weddings. You're going to have all the things you'd have in a normal kingdom. But Jesus will be king over all of that. It'll be a completely different environment. But you'll have people come and go during that time. And then at the end, and of course, all of that time, we're worshiping Christ. The Jews are going to the temple, all these things worldwide. Well, what happens? We'll skip to the end for a second. What happens at the end of the 1,000 years? Satan's released again. And here you have people who have been in Christ's kingdom for 1,000 years, and they still reject him. It's absolutely... So you're going to have the lost people who come into his kingdom at the end of the tribulation period. You're going to have all these new, but they're going to have to be told about Jesus, taught about Jesus, and so on. There's work for everybody to do, and we're going to have 1,000 years of that, and then that phase is over. But in any case, their children's children, they and their children's children will live there forever, and David, my servant, will be their prince. I will make a covenant of peace, everlasting covenant. My dwelling place will be with them. I will be their God, and they will be my people. He's talking about the Jews. Then the nations will know that I, the Lord, make Israel holy when my sanctuary is among them forever. And again, here he mentions the nations. Where his kingdom's going to be made up of many nations. And somebody will be responsible for each one of them. David's going to be Israel. So we know Israel and Egypt are going to be in his kingdom. We know David's going to be the lead for Israel. We'll see what more we learn as we go through. So that's what that is. Oh, here we go. Now we're going to get started. I love this. And I'm going to violate every teaching law there is. I am now going to read to you Ezekiel chapter 39, and we'll pause along the way and see if this doesn't open your eyes. Ezekiel chapter 39, Son of man, prophesy against Gog and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, Gog, chief priest of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around and drag you along. I will bring you from the far north and send you against the mountains of Israel. Does this ring a bell to anybody? This piece of prophecy? Right, this is a battle of Armageddon. The armies gather, and I've taken many groups over there to look over that valley. That is going to be something. Then I will strike your bow from your left hand and make your arrows drop from your right hand. This is not going to be a pretty looking battle. On the mountains of Israel you will fall, you and all your troops and the nations with you. I will give you as food to all kinds of carrion birds and to the wild animals. You will fall in the open field, for I have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. I will send fire on that place, on those who live in safety in the coastlands, and they will know that I am Lord. Now he says you're going to fall in the open and the birds are going to, does that sound familiar to anybody yet? What happens at Battle of Armageddon? Blood is as high as a horse's bridle. Yeah, somewhere up in here, somewhere like that. Yeah, the death and destruction and the body count and all those kinds of things is going to be, and we'll study all of that later on. But here already, he's making mention of that in Ezekiel. I will make known my holy name among my people Israel. I will no longer let my holy name be profaned, and the nations will know that I, the Lord, am the Holy One in Israel. It is coming. It will surely take place, declares the sovereign Lord. This is the day I have spoken of. Then those who live in the towns of Israel will go out and use the weapons for fuel and burn them up, the small and large shields, the bows, the arrows, the war clubs and spears. For 7 years they will use them for fuel. They will not need to gather wood from the fields or cut it from the forest, because they will use the weapons for fuel, and they will plunder those who plundered them and loot those who looted them. So, again, this is written in their day, contemporary language. Grab your club and go out and pummel somebody. That's not how modern day warfare is. I need a Kleenex. Excuse me, just a second.
Switching from bows and arrows to nature, other types of weapons, AK-15,
AK-47. Yeah.
whatever. I mean, for fuel.
Well, one, the size of the army that's going to gather, and again, I'm going to get way ahead of us, but that's all right. If you stand up on where Solomon had his palace looking over that valley, up to the left, do we have yeah, we do have, there we go, right over your head here, Mark. Of course, now nobody can see me, but that's okay. This is Israel, okay? All this right in here. This is Israel. If you come up this coastline, this is all the Mediterranean, wonderful water, and you got a notch right here called the Gulf of something. You can't read it sideways. A bay of. It's a bay. Big old thing right in there. You can bring every amphibian thing you can imagine right in there, and this is the valley that they're talking about. And just imagine, a 50 million man army, 100 million, pick whatever number you want. Now you're standing looking out, and you can see how particularly if it was an allied force. Pick three of the countries you hate the most, and they get together in one big army, and they roll all their stuff down through, literally come right up on the beach and right down the valley. It's going to be huge. Manpower, equipment, everything, no matter what decade it happens. Now, they all die brutally. There's several examples in the Old Testament where God can turn an army on itself, and they literally eliminate themselves. And Jesus is going to come back and defeat them in that very way. Now, you can go out in that field, step over the bodies while the other people are hauling the bodies off. You can get all the fuel stores that they brought on to run all this mechanized army, just as one example. What would happen if we melt everything? I don't know, because we don't know what it'll be like then. But what is going to happen is all of the benefits that this army brings into Israel are going to be recognized by Israel rather than be defeated by them. And we'll just have to see. But when I read about the fuel thing, I thought, well, if you're going to have, that's what slowed Patton down. He had to stop for days, I guess it was, until they caught up. Hitler had the same problem going into Russia and so on. You got to have all this fuel coming with you. So that, to me, that's one idea, is that they confiscate all the fuel, and it's enough to take care of Israel for 7 years.
Well, all those Tesla trucks they're now making for the military, with their batteries, they're going to have.
I don't know if I'm ready to go to war in a Tesla vehicle, to be honest with you. A Tesla truck. But if you think about, and who knows when we finally get there. But if you think about it, if you had this giant thing of fuel, some of these oil tankers that you see, look how much fuel's in one of them. And, Israel's about the size of New Jersey. How many of those could you capture and have enough to run the power plants in Israel for 4 or 5 years or something? I don't know, but Jesus is telling us that is what will happen. Marvelous, just absolutely marvelous. But see, now you know something you didn't know about the beginning of the tribulation period. They're going to have enough fuel for 7 years. And it says, and it doesn't tell us, Jesus doesn't tell us what, they are going to loot everything. And again, we don't know the size of the army. It's going to be enormous. Just like the Germans, or you could think of any other one. You go out there, you get all the money they brought in, you get all the whatever they brought with them, and so on and so on. Myself, I can't imagine looting anything. You're tramping over, if you can even get over the pile of dead bodies to see what there is to loot. But whatever they bring with them for this battle, and if they think they're taking Israel, in addition to wartime things, they could be bringing things that are going to help them set up their own kingdom in Israel themselves. And who knows what's all in there as well. Not to mention hauling their own currency with them probably and things like that. But whatever it is, the Jews are going to get it. Weapons for fuel. They will plunder those who plunder them and loot those who looted them, declares the Lord. On that day, I will give Gog a burial place in Israel. In the valley of those who travel east of the sea, it will block the way of travelers, because Gog and his hordes will be buried there. So it will be called the Valley of Hamon Gog. Now, I can tell you loosely where it is. This is a thing I put up here for something else. But generally speaking, it's in this area right here. And there's a road called one of the King's trade routes that today even, I should have written down the name of the town. It's there right now. It's still active. Small, 12, 15,000 person village town. But there was a trail that came down across. This is the Jordan River. Oh, you know what? I may be too high here. It may be down here. In either case, it's still there, and they are going to come. So the Valley of Harm is over here. They're going to bring all the bodies over into, which today would be Jordan. They're going to bury them all in this spot over here that it's referring to. So when it says it's blocking the traffic, people who are headed east, west, people who are headed west to the Mediterranean or people headed east this way have to pass through there. This was the time that the scripture was written, and who knows, it may be the case again. We don't know. But that's where they're going to begin to bury all the dead from this battle. And so it's called the Valley of Hamon Gog. For 7 months, the Israelites will be burying them in order to cleanse the land. So here's the other thing. The Jews have been scattered, right? We talked about they ran down the Edomite land, the red land, Petra, whatever. They just get out of Jerusalem, try to get out of Israel as much as they can because the Antichrist had it in for them. So they've scattered literally worldwide. I mean, just like the Jews did when Hitler went crazy. They're all over the place. So the good news is you can come home. The bad news is it's covered in dead bodies. And birds are eating all its flesh, and so on and so on and so on. A lot of work. The beginning of Christ's millennial reign is going to be cleaning the place up. He does not come back and wave a magic wand. They're going to have to get their hands, dirty is not the right word, but get to work and clear all this out, loot whatever the looting part is, haul off whatever the fuel part is, clean the valley out, get all these dead people down to this Hamon Gog area, somewhere down in here. And it's going to take 7 months initially, which kind of corresponds with the period of mourning. But Israel I think Israel mourns for 2 years, I think. Excuse me. For 7 months, they will be burying them in order to cleanse the land. All the people of the land will bury them. So you're not going to have some high and mighty sitting there watching the crowds go by, hauling all these, but no, everybody is going to be involved. And the day I display my glory will be a memorable day for them, declares the sovereign Lord. People will be continually employed in cleansing the land, continually. There's a lot of work. They will spread out across the land, and along with others, they will bury any bodies that are lying on the ground. Now, after the 7 months, they will carry out a more detailed search. As they go through the land, anyone who sees a human bone will leave a marker beside it until the grave diggers bury it in the valley of Hamon Gog, near a town called Hamona. And so they will cleanse the land. The death and destruction. Oh boy, I don't know what's the matter this morning. Apologize to everybody listening on my microphone. The death and destruction is going to be so intense. It's almost hard for us to imagine. And imagine you're driving along I-25 and there's somebody's head on the side of the road. Oh, got to stop. I got a marker for that. How'd you like to be the grave diggers that have to go along block after block looking for all the markers? Oh, there's a hand there. There's an arm over there, that sort of thing. A little bit like the people that keep the side of the highway clear from litter with their, little and it's going to take a long time to actually cleanse the land. The fascinating thing is here is Ezekiel getting this picture from Jesus. What do we got? 3,000 years ago, roughly. Incredible, and how specific it is too. This is not, just general info. I mean, this is geography. Everything is called out in here. It's incredible. Now we're going to keep reading, and it says in verse 17. Son of man, this is what the sovereign Lord says, call out to every kind of bird and all the wild animals. Assemble and come together from all around to the sacrifice I am preparing for you, the great sacrifice on the mountains of Israel. There you will eat flesh and drink blood. You will eat the flesh of mighty men and drink the blood of the princes of the earth, as if they were rams and lambs and goats and bulls, all of them fattened animals from Bashan. Now, again, you're reading along there, watch. The flesh of who? Yeah. You're going to have eat the flesh of men. Where I lost my other mighty men. So those are your fighters, and David had his mighty men. All of them fattened at the. That's eat the. Thank God I lost my place here. Greatest sacrifice. They will eat the flesh. You will eat the flesh of mighty men. Oh, and drink the blood of the princes, the princesses of the earth. Oh, wait a minute. Royalty? So again, if you have formed this giant coalition and you're going in to take Israel for yourself and cleanse it of the Israelis, you're going to have all kinds of senior people involved, not just the soldiers. Yeah, the soldiers are going to lead the way, but you're going to want to set up a kingdom, and probably a dictator or something is going to be in the group along with. So there's a lot of people getting killed in this thing at the end. So at the sacrifice and prepare, oh, you will eat, yeah, till you, oh, no, that's right. At the sacrifice I'm preparing for you, you will eat fat till you are glutted and drink blood till you are drunk. Doesn't that sound wonderful? At my table, you will eat your fill of horses and riders, mighty men and soldiers of every kind, declares the sovereign Lord. I will display my glory among the nations, and all the nations will see the punishment I inflict and the hand I lay on them. Yeah, so the countries that aren't participating in the army are going to get to see what happens to the countries that did come together. The hand I lay on them. From that day forward, the people of Israel will know that I am the Lord their God, and the nations will know that the people of Israel went into exile for their sin, because they were unfaithful to me. So I hid my face from them and handed them over to their enemies, and they all fell by the sword. I dealt with them according to their uncleanliness and their offenses, and I hid my face from them. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says: I will now restore the fortunes of Jacob, and will have compassion on all the people of Israel, and I will be zealous for my holy name. They will forget their shame and all the unfaithfulness they showed towards me when they lived in safety in their land, and no one to make them afraid. And that was one of their sins, and still is. That's a concern. They get so caught up in their own strength or the strength of their allies, they don't turn to God. And that's happened to them in the past, and that'll happen to them in the future. They're going to be so dependent on this alliance they set, and I'm getting way ahead of myself, so we won't go too far there. But they're going to be so convinced that they've worked out a solution that brings peace to them for a period of 3.5 years till the Antichrist breaks the peace. And not because God did it, but they did it. And that's what he's referring to here. And they've done it numerous times like that. I will be proved holy through them when I have brought them back from the nations and have gathered them from the countries of their enemies. I will be proved holy through them in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord their God. For though I sent them into exile among the nations, I will gather them to their own land, not leaving any behind. I will no longer hide my face from them, for I will pour out my spirit on the people of Israel, declares the sovereign Lord. And that is one thing that we spoke about last week that's going to be different, is the Jews will have the Holy Spirit now living in them, just as we do. Okay. Now, it's really going to get, that's what this little thing is for up here. We're going to go to chapter 40 in Ezekiel. And in chapter 40, the temple is restored and the area around it. In the 25th year of our exile, the beginning of the year, in the 10th month, in the 14th year after the fall of the city, on that very day, the hand of the Lord was on me, and he took me there. In visions of God, he took me to the land of Israel and set me on a very high mountain, on whose south side were some buildings that looked like a city. He took me there, and I saw a man whose appearance was like bronze. He was standing in the gateway with a linen cord and a measuring rod in his hand. And the man said to me, Son of man, look carefully and listen closely, and pay attention to everything I'm going to show you. For that is why you have been brought here. Tell the people of Israel everything you see. And now we get this vision. I saw a wall completely surrounding the temple area. Okay, that's my wall completely surrounding the temple area, trust me. The length of the measuring rod was 6 cubits, and we're all these cubits and such. That's okay, we'll move on. Then he went to the east gate. Now, again, to orient you a little bit here. This is north. This is south. This is east. And we have the Kidron Valley. And of course, this would be, I hope it's west. So what you'd have out here, if it was really to scale, this is a Mediterranean. All right. Then he took me to the east gate. He climbed its steps, and I've been on those steps. It's pretty cool. He climbed its steps and measured the threshold of the gate. It was 1 rod deep. The alcoves for the guards, 1 rod and 1 rod, projecting between 5 cubits. And then we have all this description of things. There's a portico will face the temple 1 rod deep. And then verse 8, then he measured the gateway 8 cubits this way, and so on. Inside the east gate were 3 alcoves on each side. The 3 had the same measurements, and the faces projecting walls on each side the same measurements. Then he measured the width of the entrance of the gateway, and it was 10 by 13. In front of each was a wall 1 cubit, and the alcoves were 6. Then he measured the gateway from the top, and he measured along the fences, and he measured this, and he measured that. And all the opening, we're going to jump to verse 17. Then he brought me into the outer court. There I saw some rooms and a pavement that had been constructed all around the court. There were 30 rooms along. It abutted the side of the gateways, and as wide as they were long, this was the lower pavement. Then he measured the distance in the inside, and we get all of this again. Then we have the north gate, and we get all of this described. Then we have the south gate. And what I want you to see through all of this is the gates of the inner court. How precise. I mean, this isn't just a vision of a rebuilt temple. You could build it with these measurements. I mean, it's really just wonderful. Portico face. Then we'll go to 30 different gates. That's okay. Then verse 38 is rooms for preparing sacrifices. And yes, they are going to go back to sacrificial worship during the millennial reign. So all of this construction that's being called out here and all these measurements, this is all going on during the millennial reign. Incredible. Rooms for preparing sacrifices, rooms for the priest were one side of the north and one facing, and rooms facing south, and so on and so on. Rooms for the priests. Then he measured the court. It was square. So there's a court inside here on the right-hand side, probably. Then he measured the court. It was square, 100 cubits long and 100 cubits wide. Cubits roughly 1.5 feet. If you get into archaeology, there's like 3 different recognized cubits, by the way. 19, yeah, you got that too, yeah. Well, they basically the elbow to, yeah, what they had was, cul-de-sac for a second. Even back during Ezekiel's time, the Egyptians in particular were excellent engineers. And the stuff that you can excavate that will measure exactly, you look at the foundation and it's built of these rough-hewn stones and, all that little stuff. It turns out it's exactly 3 cubits long or 1 cubit deep or, whatever it is. And what they did was they had a stick, we'd call it a yardstick, officially recognized by their, whoever country we're talking about here. They had the regulation cubit, and they would use that to measure everything with, and roughly 18.5 inches. And yeah, when they first started, can you see some guy on the ground? Okay, Frank, 20 cubits that way. 1. Yeah, probably not. I think I'll get a stick and figure it out. But so here it closes with Oh, and the altar was in front of the temple. They're going to have sacrificial worship. Uh, he brought me, so the new temple, he brought me to the portico of the temple and measured the jambs of the portico. They were 5 wide on either side. The width of the entrance was 14 cubits. So 14 times a foot and a half is 21 feet, I believe. And his projected walls with 3 wide on either side. The portico was this, was that, reached by a flight of stairs, and there were pillars on each side of the jambs. The point of this chapter, everything gets rebuilt, but there is a plan for every bit of it. For Christ's millennial reign, he's already thought out all of this. He gave this to Ezekiel, like I said, 3,000 years ago. It isn't that Jesus is coming back and waving a magic wand. There are plans for everything, just like Trump went into office and signed all these executive orders. You think that happened between the day that he swore the oath of inauguration and that night when you? No. For months, there was a team, an advanced team, developing all these things. And the same will be true. When Christ comes back and defeats his enemy, boom, day one, his reign starts, and he knows exactly what he's going to do. And he tells it, all of it to us in the Bible. It's incredible. All right, let me move this out of the way. You can turn to Ezekiel 41. Now's our time. Yeah, maybe we'll get through here. All right. Yeah, so we have more now. It says the man brought me to the main hall and measured all this stuff again. Then he went into the inner sanctuary and he measured all of that. Then verse 5, he measured the walls of the temple, 6 cubits thick. That's 9 feet thick, I believe. Is that right, roughly? And he measured the length of the sanctuary, 20, and so on. You can make a little balsa wood model at home using this if you like. Stairway went up. I saw the temple had a raised base. The building faced a courtyard. Then he measured the temple. Then he measured the length of the buildings. Now we're over at the verse, I think it's 16. The main hall, the inner sanctuary, and the porticos, as well as the threshold, narrow windows and galleries around the 3 of them. Everything beyond and including the threshold was covered with wood. The floor, the wall up to the windows, and the windows were covered. In the space outside the entrance, the walls were carved with cherubim, palm trees everywhere. Palm trees alternated with cherubim. It's going to be beautiful. Oh my goodness! The face of carved the palm trees alternated with cherubim. Each cherubim had 2 faces: the face of a human being towards the palm tree on one side, and the face of a lion towards the palm tree on the other. They were carved all around the temple. These are carved pieces. From the floor of the area above the entrance, cherubim and palm trees were carved on the wall of the main hall, and so on. You can read each door has leaves and so on and so on. So that was a continuation of the temple area. It's going to be spectacular. Now, we're going to keep our moving going here. We're going to go to 42 very quickly. Rooms for the priests, and 42 covers where the priest will live, and what their rooms will be like, and those sorts of things. I'll just have you trust me on that. See if we can get this in today. We go to chapter 43. God's glory returns to the temple. So they've rebuilt this, and again, a millennial reign. That this rebuilt temple doesn't happen overnight, but they have 1,000 years. So if it takes them 2-3 years, okay. It'll employ lots and lots of construction people, lots of people getting out the supplies made to build it with, and so on. There'll be a lot of activity, along with all the burying of people and so on. Chapter 43, God's glory returns to the temple. Then the man brought me to the gate facing east, and I saw the glory of God, the God of Israel, coming from the east. His voice was like the roar of rushing waters, and the land was radiant with his glory. The vision I saw was like the vision I had seen when he came to destroy the city, and like the visions I had seen by the Kabar River, and I fell face down. The glory of the Lord entered the temple through the gate facing east. So he's going to come through this gate right here. Facing east. Then the Spirit lifted me up and brought me into the inner court, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. While the man was standing beside me, I heard someone speaking to me from inside the temple. He said, "Son of man, this is the place of my throne and the place for the soles of my feet. This is where I will live among the Israelites forever." So God's not building a presidential palace, presidential library. He's not going out to Greenbrier. He's going to rule and reign from the temple as God and as you would expect, quite frankly. Glorious. It's just going to be, you just can't imagine it. The people of Israel will never again defile my holy name, neither they nor their kings, by their prostitution and the funeral offerings for their kings at their death. When they placed their wall between me and them, they defiled my holy name by their detestable practices. So I destroyed them in my anger. Now let them put away from me their prostitution and the funeral offerings for their kings, and I will live among them forever. Son of man, describe the temple to the people of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their sins. Let them consider its perfection, and if they are ashamed of all they have done, make known to them the design of the temple, its arrangement, its exit and entrances, its whole design, and all its regulations and laws. Write these down before them so that they may be faithful to its design and follow all its regulations. This is why there's so many specifics in those chapters we just read. The people of Israel are to know these things and to know them well. This is the law of the temple. All the surrounding area on top of the mountain will be most holy. Such is the law of the temple. And again, you'd have to be over there. And again, Wes's crude artwork. But essentially, Mount Moriah, it's like any, almost looked like somebody's heart rhythm. Anyway, it's not that huge up there, but there is a top to it, and that's what he's saying. And in Jerusalem is built, or the original Jerusalem is built this way with the Wailing Wall Temple, so on up there. Today, of course, Jerusalem spreads out all over the place, but initially, so at the high part of the hill, this is where David would have lived, and then all the houses down below. And of course, that's how he could see a woman taking a bath on the porch. Okay, I get on that one, we'll never get the lesson done. But God's saying that the whole of the top of Moriah is going to be holy. And when God says this part's holy, take off your shoes. Approach humbly, I would suggest. But he is going to literally be king of the world from the top of the mountain. Figuratively, literally, all of it. Just incredible. And people come to visit him to call on the king are going to have to go through all of that to get to him. And it just takes your breath out, I'm telling you. So this is the law. All the surrounding area on top of the mountain will be most holy. Such is the law of the temple. Then it says the great altar is restored. These are the measurements of the altar in cubic, this and that, height of the altar, so on and so on. You go on over above the altar, cubits high. Then he said to Son of Man, now we're at 18. This is what the sovereign Lord says. These will be the regulations for sacrificing burnt offerings and splashing blood against the altar when it is built. You are to give a young bull as a sin offering to the Levitical priests of the family of Zadok, who come near to minister before me, declares the sovereign Lord. You are to take some of its blood and put it on the four horns of the altar and the four corners of the upper ledge and all around the rim, and so purify the altar and make atonement for it. You are to take the bull for the sin offering and burn it in the designated part of the temple area outside the sanctuary. On the second day, you are to offer a male goat without defect for a sin offering, and the altar is to be purified as it was with the bull. When you have finished purifying it, you are to offer a young bull and a ram from the flock, both without defect. You are to offer them before the Lord, and the priests are to sprinkle salt on them and sacrifice them as a burnt offering to the Lord. For 7 days you are to provide a male goat daily for a sin offering. You are also to provide a young bull and a ram from the flock, both without defect. For 7 days they are to make atonement for the altar and cleanse it. Thus they will dedicate it. At the end of these days, from the 8th day on, the priests are to present your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings on the altar. Then I will accept you, declares the sovereign Lord. So we're going to have a world where the Jews are back to sacrificial worship, quite specifically called out. The rest of us accepted Christ. He already sacrificed for us. But the Jews are going to, through the whole millennial period, are going to be participating in sacrificial worship. All right, that's that. We're almost. Yes. If it was easy, it wouldn't be God.
So
All right.
because they don't do sacrificial worship now, they have to go back
Yeah.
to do.
And because it says in there, you prostituted yourselves, you defiled this, you defiled that, because you lived that life. This is the life you're going to live now. Very disciplined, very ordered, exactly as I tell you.
That's his process of getting them back.
Yeah, yeah. Getting them all ready for the new heaven and new earth. But then I'll really go down a cul-de-sac on that one. Yeah, next week. So we've seen, first week, God's bringing the Jews back. God's going to restore them. Second week now, he's restoring the temple area. And that was pretty much what we read about. Bringing them all back, combining the two sticks into one, and then all about the temple. And it's not just for sacrificial worship. He is going to live and reign there. So now you can go into the temple, and it's God and Jesus there as one. The Holy Spirit, of course, is everywhere, as is God. I remember when I was in seminary. How do you actually define God if he's everywhere at all time, sees everything, knows everything, and yet Jesus said, if two or you more are gathered, I'll be there with you. There's a thing about, and I still don't know how to quite explain it, but we see God up there and we're down here, but we know God's down here with us. That sort of thing. It's because try to imagine God confined to a temple doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. We'll understand it all when we get there. What a day of rejoicing that will be. No. Singing to the choir, literally. So next week we're going to pick up now. We're going to look at how he restores the land of Israel, where the 12 tribes are going to go, what else is going to change versus the Old Testament arrangement. It's all cool stuff. So we'll go one more week. Promise the online class. Next week will be it for Ezekiel, because I'm dying to get into Daniel. But we need to, what I like about Ezekiel is it opens your eyes to the first few years of the millennial reign is just preparing for the millennial reign, building the temple and cleansing the land of the dead and, all of that sort of thing. I bet you go down, pick somebody's Sunday school class somewhere and ask them to describe what's going on during the millennial reign. They'll just tell you, well, Jesus is reigning. They have no idea what's going on, let alone how he's going to rule the nations, what's going to happen to Egypt. We'll look at that next week, so on.